Welcome to Beyond the Blend, the podcast that goes behind the science and talks to the people at the heart of the lubricant market, telling the real story of the people who make the lubricant market move. With real insight and honest conversations, we aim to show off the people's side from across the entire lubricant supply chain. Join me, Steve Knapp, and Rob Taylor as we delve behind the scenes of the lubricant industry. Let's go. So let's start with a quick 5 from 5. Doug, factory floor or conference stage?
I enjoy both, but I really enjoy being on the factory floor, getting down and dirty with the maintenance guys and reliability guys, taking what I've learned from, say, the STLE or books and teaching them. So I do enjoy getting dirty.
Okay, cool. Sunrise or sunset?
I do like sunrise. I'm an early guy with a cup of coffee.
A road trip or fly to get there quicker?
Road trip.
Okay. Do you prefer a movie on a big screen or a movie sat on the couch at home?
Movie set on the couch at home.
And are you a bookshelf full of books guy or a bucket list full of experience guy?
A little bit of both. I do have quite a bit of books and a few more hiding back behind here. And reference material, reading, learning all the time. But I do have a bucket list where when I did travel a lot, I like to stop off and see certain things while I'm in the area because you may not pass this way again, right?
Yeah. Okay. I'll let you have both on that one, Doug. I'll let you have both.
Hard decision.
Yeah. It is a hard decision. It is. Yeah. People think this 5 from 5 is easy, right? It's tough. Yeah. It's tough,
it is.
Man. But anyway, if you haven't worked it out, who we've got on Beyond the Blend for this conversation, it's Doug Sackett. So I'm delighted to be joined by Doug. Doug is one of those people whose names carries real weight across the lubricant and reliability community. A certified lubrication specialist, industry educator, mentor, and advocate for professional development. Doug has spent decades helping organizations improve reliability, reduce failures, and get more from their equipment through better lubrication practices. Along the way, he's become a respected voice within STLE, a passionate supporter of certification and learning, and someone committed to help others build successful careers in our industry. Doug, welcome to Beyond the Blend.
Well, thank you, Steve. I'm glad to be here. I thank you for that introduction. I love to mentor and grow the next generation, especially.
But I imagine, like many people in lubricants, I suspect it wasn't necessarily the career that you imagined as a young man. So, Doug, take us back. Where did young Doug think he was going, and what did he think he would become?
Well, I grew up in a family that we were entrepreneurs. My dad owned a couple restaurants, started that, and then him and I owned a little business together, a little convenience store. And, so I was heading down the business road. And we had a guy come in, wanted to buy our business, so we sold it. And Dad retired. I took a couple months off, but my wife got tired of me sitting home, but went to work helping a friend of mine with an electric motor business. And so I was doing the business side of it and got to learn how to rewind motors and different things. And little did I know that would carry over. I got hired by a family, great family, Ralph Weeks, that I was over their convenience stores, over 20-something convenience stores, and then worked that into a really good area. And then they said, hey, we want you to go run our oil business. They had another side business going. And I said, my dad taught me where to get my oil changed. We were not mechanically inclined. We were business guys. And he said, well, here's the P&L of the book company. Here's the product data book. Here's a raise and go get a new truck. And I went, wow, I get a new truck. Cool. And so went down to Smith Brothers Oil Company in Bartow, Florida, and showed up at 6 o'clock in the morning. The guys looked at me like I was crazy because they never had a manager show up at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I said, well, I got to learn what you're doing. And so I would ride with drivers and learn. And we did a lot in the mining and power gen industry, a lot of industrial stuff, and had some really great mentors back then, that helped me along. And so that started my path into lubrication. And reliability and different things like that, has kind of focused my career on. You find a passion about what you do.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll come on to maybe some of those mentors through our conversation. But I've got to ask first. So the restaurant, and you're in Florida, I guess. Are you in Florida? Yeah,
I am in Florida.
Yeah. Okay. So what was the restaurant specializing in?
So I was actually born in Lafayette, Indiana. And my dad owned 4. They were Waffle House restaurants of Indiana. If you're a Waffle House, if you know Waffle House here in America, which is being made famous by the FIFA World Cup, we have a German traveler that's fallen in love with Waffle House, but they're smaller. My dad's were bigger restaurants, kind of like a Denny's or IHOP kind of thing in Indiana for years. So it was Waffle House, 24 hours, breakfast. We were in a college town, Purdue University. I started working there when I was 12, bussing tables and doing dishes. That was our thing. We've just always worked.
Yeah. So always around people and customers and that kind of space then, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
We enjoy people. It's nice to get out and network and meet new people, and grow, as you say, plan, grow, do, right?
You got it, man.
Grow and do.
You got it. So I should have asked you on the 5 from 5, a question around toppings on waffles. So what would be your go-to topping on a waffle, Doug?
You have hit my childhood right there. So one of the items they had on the menu was a peanut butter and jelly waffle.
Right.
So as a child, I loved peanut butter and jelly. And so he always kept that on his menu, even though nobody else hardly ever ordered it but me. But it was a peanut butter and jelly waffle with maple syrup. So,
wow. Okay. Before we get into sort of more serious questions, yeah. I being this side of the world, is jelly, is it jam or is it something different? Because I can't imagine peanut butter and jam being a combination. Help me understand what jelly is.
The definition between jelly and jam, if you think about it from a grease aspect, is a jelly is more like an NLGI 3 or 4, and a jam's maybe a 1 or a single lot. It's more fluid.
Yeah, I love it. So even so Doug Sackett even can relate lubrication to peanut butter and jelly, right?
Yes.
Fantastic. So you talked about the restaurant, and that's where you sort of, I guess maybe you still carry on a passion for waffles. Who knows? But then you said you went to a store. What was that? Was that a family store, or was that employed in a? It
was a family store. My dad was helping. He was in real estate at the time. He had sold off the restaurants and had this little business. And I was 19 years old and looking for direction. And so he said, well, let's buy this little business, and I'll help you out for 6 months and get you going, and then I'll step aside. Well, of course, he never did. My dad and I worked together for over 15 years, great mentor. And, and so we did that. We built it up, and we were a large beer outlet, the second largest in our area. We started a vending route and, all kinds of different stuff. Had a Greyhound bus station and, and just worked it and built it up and, made a good living out of it for 15 years and then kind of sold it. And he retired. He was getting to that age. I still have to work. So, but wow. It was a good learning experience. A lot of good people there that you get to meet. That's a key thing, where you get to interact with people and, grow your relationships and learn from everybody.
Yeah, indeed. And how was that working with your dad? I think my dad's great, but I can't imagine for a minute wanting to be with him for every moment of the day, right? So how was that?
It was good and bad, as you were saying. We would come to arguments on direction and different things because I was younger and wanting to do things, and he was kind of set in his ways, and but it worked out well. My dad and I always had a great relationship. I was the only boy in the family. I have 5 sisters, so that kind of, solidified our relationship. We were outnumbered.
Wow.
Yeah.
5 sisters. And so was you like big brother or baby brother?
I was baby brother. I had 4 older and 1 younger. I used to tease the younger one, she was the accident because they were having kids till they had me.
Oh, you're a tough school, you are, Doug.
We were a tough school, yeah. We can pick on each other, just don't let anybody else do it, right?
Well, I tell you, that's right. I mean, I have 3 daughters, but 5 sisters. My goodness, that's some going. Well, I guess you've got a lot of support around, and family support still around, right? So that's really special.
Yeah, we're all separated and older. A lot of miles between us now, but still good.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things in your sort of the younger Doug, you didn't mention education. You didn't mention that side of things. Was that a pretty standard education for you, Doug, or was it punctuated more with learning business?
Well, it's punctuated more learning business through my career. And so when my kids, I have a son and a daughter, and, we pushed them for education and college degrees. And so they went to the University of Florida. And so when they graduated, they approached me afterwards, and I had went for a little bit after high school, and then married and kids and, running businesses. At that time, I was running the oil company, multi-million-dollar business. And my son and them came back and said, remember how important you said college was? And I said, yeah. And they said, well, we think you should go back. And so I was an old guy that went back.
Wow.
And so, but it is important. Education is a key thing. And whether you're learning through, high school, technical schools, universities, have a career path, because, there's a lot of skilled workers that we need that don't go the university route. They go the technical school route. And that's where a lot of the maintenance and reliability guys we deal with come from. So that's a great career move in education also. But, and my thing is, whether you're high school, always be learning. If you learn something new, it's a good day, and that's a key thing. So whether you're high school, technical, junior college, university, make sure you're learning and continue to learn. Don't just stop because you get a piece of paper.
Well, and we're certainly going to come on to more learning through our conversation, because there's a bit of a red thread through your whole profile that you share out there around learning. Now, you keep opening up things to me that I've got to explore. How did that feel, going back to education when you might have been one of the older people in the room, right? I mean, was that a scary thing, Doug?
It was a little bit, but I went to a really small university that it was, the professors were very accessible. Going back and taking college algebra when I hadn't done algebra since, high school, I was like, oh my gosh, I got to relearn all this stuff. But had a great professor. And it's funny, it's one of those professors that the younger students were like, oh, she's mean. You're going to hate her. And when I went into her class, I was like, she's not mean. She wants you to learn it, And so anytime I had a question, I could just call them up and go, hey, I need to get 30 minutes of your time. And she was always accessible. So I had really great professors at a small university that cared about what you were doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I can imagine. I can just imagine. I've got a mental image of this sort of different generations all at work, and because you've got that sort of more wise head on you, you see things through a different lens to the students, the younger students, right?
It was fun. I was in a micro. It was either micro or macroeconomics class, because remember back then I was business wise, and the professor was talking about high interest rates back in the late 70s and early 80s. And y'all might not realize this, but interest rates on homes were 13, 14%. And I raised my hand. I bought my first house and it was 11.5%. And we were ecstatic that we got that rate. And she was like, oh yeah, I forgot, you're in the room.
Yeah, let's go to you for the history lesson.
Yeah. I can talk a lot on the history of economics.
Yeah, I love it. So, with all of this going on, when did lubricants first enter the picture?
2002. after I'd built the convenience store side up and they needed somebody to go down and run the oil side. And that's when the owner asked me to, if I would do that. And I said, yeah, it sounded different and exciting. And, that started my pathway, to where I am now.
Yeah. What was it about it that captured you, do you think?
First, it was the new truck.
Don't be so shallow, Doug. Don't be so shallow.
Yeah. I grew up, although I was born in Indiana, I grew up in Central Florida, and we were all a bunch of what we call rednecks. We had pickup trucks and went mudslinging and, Saturday night outside McDonald's parking lot and, just country boys, So new truck was important and are a deciding factor. But, it was just another challenge. You always like a challenge to help you grow, and take on a whole different avenue of learning and the direction you're going. So,
yeah. And you talk about grow, and you've used the word a couple of times already. And I'm always curious, why some people do absolutely invest to keep growing, and some become quite happy where they are. It doesn't mean one's right or wrong. It just works for that person, right? Where does your so I see an absolute thread around commitment to learning. You've mentioned it, as I say, 3, 4, 5, if not more times already. But where does that come from, Doug? Where does that curiosity to learn come from? Have you ever thought about what influenced that in you, or who influenced that in you?
I think it's a passion. I always tell everybody, hire for passion, train for skill in our industry. If we can teach them lubricants, but we can't teach them passion. And another business book I read, my son got it for me, called Winning by Jack Welch, who built GE into the global powerhouse. And he talks about, employees. And he says, if you have an underperforming employee, fire them. He goes, I know I sound really, kind of mean, but he goes, one, you have to look at the business of, the company to make sure it's profitable and everybody's performing. But two, you're going to do him a favor, because if he's not performing well, he doesn't have a passion for what he's doing. And that person needs to go find their passion. And that's a key thing is just passion for, our industry and learning. I get to hang around with the Society of Tribologists, Lubrication Engineers, some of the smartest people in the world. I always joke, I'm the redheaded nephew that's running around in the steel toe boots going, what would you say? And every time I meet somebody or sit in a class or go to the conference and listen to a presentation, I learn something new and go, wow, that's a whole new avenue I haven't thought about. And then I like to take what I learn and, as we talked about earlier, mentor the younger generation and or take it down into the field lubrication. I did an article. There's an article by Dr. Enrico Chiuli out of the University of Pisa about the vastness of tribology. And it shows a graph of all the areas of tribology, including, lubrication, reliability, failure mode. So when I teach a class at a plant, I tell them, you're a tribologist, and they'll all look at me funny. Like, I'm a what? And you're a tribologist. Let me show you this graph and where you fit in. You're not the research and development. You're not the biosynthetic, all the different things, but here you are. And you are part of the tribology family. And all that knowledge we get at STLE and through universities and research and development, if we don't get that knowledge down to the field, it doesn't do us any good. We have to get that great new formulation, research, metals. We get it down to the field, into the gearboxes, the hydraulics, and teach those guys how to do it correctly. And then we're successful.
Mm-hmm. So I'm hearing your passion. I'm hearing it coming through, and I've been fortunate enough to speak to you very briefly, but outside of this, and I know this isn't show face. This is real. This is real, Doug. Right? There's a passion. Can you identify somebody that put it in you? Was there an influence, a person that has kind of like opened up that within you? Because it doesn't just always happen naturally. There's someone that triggers it. Yeah.
There he is. And actually I saw a thing this morning. I can't remember where, but it said, be the person your 12-year-old you needed, And so one of those people when I started in the industry was Greg Morris with Shell Lubricants. Still a great friend today. And he was my first rep. And I'd gotten the bid on a 42,000 gallon turbine oil fill, initial fill. And so we were bringing oil in and tankers, and the last 2 loads, the company that was putting in said, "Oh, this is dirty oil." And I went, "What do you mean it's dirty? It's new oil." So Greg said, "Hey, it's okay. This is what happened. I'm going to bring a company in and we'll filter it." So he brought another company in, and I'm watching all this stuff, and I'm going, "Oh, this is cool, Greg." And he says, "Well, you're going to learn a lot more. I've got another guy coming in that's going to be your technical rep named Mike Darr." And Mike Darr was as technical as you could get. He taught me. He took time. We used to sit in my office figuring out problems down in the mines, and just a great influence to help take me to that technical level. And he always pushed me too. You need to go get certified. And so, running an oil company is pretty busy. And so I finally made time, did my first, ICML certification, kind of entry level stuff. And then, he kept pushing me to do CLS, and just time wouldn't commit. But he kept pushing me. And so I finally went and did that, and, kept growing from there. But those were the 2 most influential guys in the start, lead me down.
It's nice to shout them out on the podcast. And I think when the listeners of Beyond the Blend start to hear about these moments and these people, I think it really humanizes our industry. And kudos to Mike and to Greg for playing a part in your journey. Before we come on to the sort of certified side of things, because I do think it matters in your world particularly, and our world. But I just want to go back to the passion side of things. Is it all lubrication? Like, does Doug just talk about lubrication? I mean, he turned jelly into NLGI, right? So or are there other things outside of lubrication that you're learning and you're still learning and you're interested in? Are there new passions emerging, Doug?
I love being outdoors. I actually live in kind of the woods, 18 acres, so I can get on my tractor and ride around. And then I've got a boat, so we love fishing in the water. So I'm still learning. My wife says I love to fish. I'm not good at it, but I have all the toys to fish. So, it's kind of like lubrication. You have to learn and read and grow and study the water and different climates and stuff. So kind of another, passion that, one day I'll get to do a little bit more of.
I like it. So does that imply you have patience? Because I imagine fishing requires quite a lot of reflective time and patience. I don't think I'd be very good at it, by the way, because I would put that down as one of my lower down my list of attributes. Would you describe yourself as a patient guy, Doug?
I do think it requires patience, because it's called fishing and not catching, so it does give you a chance to slow down in a very busy world. I always keep busy with what I do. I'm blessed. My wife, allows me to do that and supports me 110%, but it's one of those things where it gets you a chance to slow down. We go kayak fishing, and you can, paddle out early in the morning, watch that sunrise, which is just, phenomenal to see. And then, you're just out there kind of casting around and, seeing if you can catch something. But it's kind of a relaxing part for my life.
I love it. Well, you've just added something to my bucket list, and that's coming on your place, jumping in a kayak with you, going to see the sunrise, and to go fishing, because that, you just made that sound beautifully idyllic. So well done on you. And I'm certainly going to steal that. It's called fishing and not catching. I think that's a lovely phrase. So that's
I did have a buddy of mine, and he works for another oil company, and he goes, I want to come down and go fishing with you. I said, all right. So he called me, he said, I'm coming down. I said, well, I'll tell you what, I could take you fishing. I got a buddy of mine that will take you catching. And so he took his son down with my friend Randy, and they caught fish. Because Randy's the one, he studied the water and done all that stuff. And so he went catching. Now his son wants to move down here and become a fishing guy.
Love it. Love it. Well, you're influencing people in a different way, taking the time to learn the skills. Well, I'm sure when that time comes, Doug, you're going to be very proficient at fishing because you're a lifelong learner, and you've spent so much of your career helping others become better lubricant professionals. Yeah, not just doing the job, but elevating the profession, right? Raising standards. Well, why does standards and certification, why do they matter? Why do they become maybe even more important now?
I think it's more important because unfortunately we live in a world that's full of scam artists and always get rich quick kind of things that you have to, especially when you're operating a multi-million-dollar plant, the downtime is, $100,000 an hour, or something like that. You need to know who you're relying on is knowledgeable, and that's where the certifications come in. And going through those certifications, and there's so many of them out there. There's a lot more than when I started, but when you go through that certification process, whether it's in, starting at the entry level at an ICML and going all the way to the CLS with the STLE, which is, still considered the pinnacle of certifications, and there's a lot in between there, whether it's, SMRP has a CMRP certification, there's vibration, there's ultrasound, all these different things helps you become a better source for information for a customer because they may not have access to those things, their budgets and constraints, where you can be a reliable source that can give them proper information on lubrication and reliability. So that's kind of a key way to making sure, you're dealing with a professionally certified person in the industry.
Yeah. I guess there are a lot of instant responses that can be generated by technology, right? So Google and AI searches, that starts to open up all sorts of risk potentially. Do you think?
It does, because actually, I've and we have Google. When I Google something on a product and it pulls up the AI answer, and I look at it and I go, that's not correct. And, I always tell everybody, I'm a lube geek. I have a friend with Shell, Lucas, I call him a super lube geek. And on Saturday night, he's texting me that he's arguing with Grok on a Kobelco gas compressor, and he's winning. He's right, and the AI is incorrect. And AI is only as smart as what the information is put into it. We can dig a lot deeper and get our own information, like I said, by having the library, having the books that we can reference. You can't see them, but I've got a whole reference library above my desk. So when somebody calls with a problem, I can go, compressors. I've got Heinz Block's book. I've got, lubricant degradation by Sanya Mathuri, all the different books that I can go, wait a minute. I want to verify what I'm saying. And it's through the industry experts, not AI, because sometimes I feel you're right. AI can be a little sketchy every now and then.
Yeah. We're seeing it through our biorevolution research. And I know that you're aware of some of that and what that sort of has entailed. But we're seeing that the emergence of AI is increasing the value that a seller puts on insight over just information. And I think where you are with certification, accreditation, all of this kind of knowledge space, to be able to underline our insight with that sort of level of confidence and authority really matters, because anybody can be an AI guru, anybody can be an AI expert, but having that level of insight is what people are really looking for right now. So, let's
and I think
keep that going.
AI has its place, where, like a lot of our sales staff was reading your book and they're starting to do AI on sales calls, and I always tell everybody, and there's always an argument whether cold calling is dead or not. I go, it's warm calling now, because we all have these little computers in our pocket. And when you're sitting outside a building, you can Google what they do, so you have an understanding more. And that's where the computer and AI, different things can help out with. But I always tell everybody, don't keep it as the gospel. Do your research to make sure that information is correct.
So I think you're right. I mean, I think you're seeing all of these tools as additive to our skill set. Maybe even like parts of our old pilot's case. Our old briefcase that we used to carry around. We'd have all of our tools within them. Now they're a bit more digital and probably set up in the cloud. But they should be seen as tools and maybe not the answer.
Lower hit rates, missed targets, and no receptionist to patch you through because buyers decide before you arrive. Selling Lubricants Smarter tells Dan Wilder's story of ditching the old playbook. Qualify hard with SpanCop. Plan sharper meetings with Whopper. Use AI to move faster and turn technical expertise into clear outcomes buyers trust. Built on the Buyer Revolution research, it's a practical blueprint for modern lubricant selling. Search Selling Lubricants Smarter on Amazon and buy your copy today.
What sort of things concern you about the future then, Doug, in that sense? When we talk about standards and certification, we talk about, continually raising the bar. What sort of things trouble you or worry you? Budgets, people investing in skill sets? What sort of things trouble you?
That's always a hard part in our industry, and I always start out, I've taught at some pretty big companies, and I applaud them for what they do because they're investing in their employees. And I lived this firsthand back when I was in Smith Brothers. I didn't know a lot, and the owner says, "Hey, we can hire this guy. He's real smart." And we sent him to become CLS certified, and a month later he jumped ship and went to another company. That's going to happen. Okay, you can't stop that 100%. But I use the philosophy, if we train them and they leave, what's it cost us? But if we don't train them and they stay, what does it cost us? And that's the thing. If you train them and you treat them right, they're going to stay long term. And companies need to make sure they're investing in their employees. Because when you do that, they'll become if they feel that they can grow with the company, they'll stay long term. And that's what a lot of people are looking for. We don't want them to become complacent. Go, I'm stuck in this position. I can't do anything else. Send them for training. Get your staff certified and grow, because the return on investment in maintenance and reliability is huge. I think, what was it? Every dollar invested in reliability, you get $40,000 return or something like that on a study by an engineering group. And so there's a huge investment in that. And I always joke, we should get I saw a t-shirt once had a maintenance guy on the front with his work belt, and it said, if it ain't broke, you're welcome. To use a little slang, ain't in the South. But, and that's the thing. If everything's running smoothly, they're the most forgotten guys in the plant. But something breaks, they're going to scream at them. But what I also like to teach them in their growing is monitor your KPIs. Where were you at 10 years ago compared to now? So you can always show management that documentation, because sometimes management will go, everything's smooth. Why do we need that? We're paying for oil analysis. We're paying for this, but that's what got you to where you're at, from before. And I've seen that firsthand. So,
yeah, I mean, on that side of things, my reflection when you started talking about that, I think the corporate memory can be very short. So I think documenting these things really matters, and the KPI side of things. I remember when we used to look after the mines, when I was fortunate enough to lead the business in sub-Saharan Africa. Part of the corporate memory that was short from the buyer side was the value we created by solving the problems that they had, right? So documented that was really important.
Yeah, what I did the mines for, I think, your previous employer, and they taught me how to do that customer value review. And so we helped and Mike Dar and I worked on it. Mike and Randy and I. Randy was our technical guy down there in the field for that. So we worked on a failure that they were having on third train slurry, $250,000 every time it failed. And so we went in there and figured out, contamination and all these different things. And we filtered it clean and did all that. And so we went back and did that and said, 7 years later, it hasn't failed. So every year I walked into purchasing for my, what have you done for me lately meeting, and I would slide that there and go, They go, "Ah, you're good. How's the kids? They're good. See you next year." But yeah, creating that value, as a company, if you're supporting somebody, is very important.
Yeah.
Because you're going back in there and going, and you don't want them to forget. So always put a dollar value on. That's why I like to find out, what's your downtime cost you? If I increase your uptime, what's that going to save you? Had a paper mill in Chicago I did, and they said, "Oh, we calculated that, and it was $750,000 to the bottom line for every 1% we increased the reliability." And rough estimates, they were like 88%. Now that was being generous, because this was an old paper mill. And I said, "Well, if we replace this Bowser unit and all this different stuff, we can get you up to the 94, 95% range, which is a 6-7% increase." I said, "You're going to have to spend 1.2 to 1.4 million." Of course, you could hear management go, "Ah." I said, "Hold on, next slide." 750,000 per 1%. And they did the math and they went, "When do we start?" And that's where the business side comes in. I started by as a business guy, so I can put a dollar value on anything. That's what I love to do.
See, and I think that's really insightful, again, for our listeners, of how that more technical bias side of the lubricant sector overtly adds significant value to an operation. And earlier in our chat, you were talking about how we're bringing in engineers and how we're bringing people through, but that connection to the commercial aspect is absolutely critical, isn't it? So how do you see that playing out in the industry? I mean, are we bringing in the right talent? How are we creating commercial advantage through real technical insight? I mean, what are you seeing, Doug? Because I think this is a really important area of our conversation.
It is, and you're right. And we've had this discussion. I also help out, Society of Tribologists, lubrication engineers. I'm on the executive committee and work a lot with them. And we work closely with ILMA, which is the Independent Lubricant Manufacturers Association. I helped them at a youth conference, skills leadership conference, because we want to start recruiting. How do we get people into our industry? We talked earlier about, becoming an accidental tribologist. I'm an accidental field engineer, We want to go, well, they career path that from junior high to high school. I've got the Southwest Research Tribo case that I can do STEM projects at schools and start getting them interested in the field. People are, have that passion early about it, because it's such a great industry, and whether you're in research and development or you're a field guy like me, I've got to be in some of the coolest plants you've ever seen, from steel, aluminum, food grade, Jack Daniels. I've done a plant asset survey there. You name it. I've been there. And that's my joke. I watch How It's Made on the History Channel, and some of those plants I've been in, and I can go, "Oh, this is cool. I know how it's made," And so it's an exciting industry, but it's getting new talent to come in and understand that. And then you got the education process, because you don't want them to be just salespeople. A salesperson just walks in with a price. I've got hydraulic oil. It's X amount of dollars per gallon. And I told a guy at a power plant, I said, "Well, if they do that, kick them out the door." And he said, "Why?" I said, "Well, because they're not asking the right questions. What type of hydraulic oil? What's the pressure? What's the temperature? Do you need zinc free? Do you need high BI? All the different things to get you the right product. Because if you go with the cheapest product, your equipment is going to fail quicker. And so that's where you marriage the technical side with the sales side, the commercial side, and it creates a really good professional experience for them.
Yeah, and I think what you're highlighting something here that's really critical. And just to underline your lessons and your good sort of insights for the listeners, again, the biorevolution research has told us that a buyer is looking, and when I say buyer, it's all roles that buy, not just procurement. They're looking for a supplier that talks 5 years down the track. Yes. I.e., we know this is coming. We know this is the consequence. We know this is the outcome of working with us over a longer period. the thing that they value the least is exactly what you just said. That's the seller that's chasing the quota, the gallons, the one that's literally just trying to sell the product because it's serving their bonus, basically, versus the other way around. So I just wanted to underline what you said with that little bit of insight we have from our
and we research. Actually did that, down the mines. It was, we took them from 320,000 gallons a year to 180 through reliability, best practices, filtration, all the different services that went with it. And of course, you get asked, well, you just lost sales. I go, yes, but that business never went out for bid. They were so happy with us as a supplier because we did those extra things. It never went out for bid. And that's a key thing now. A lot of these big companies put their lubes out for bid every 3 to 5 years. And, unless you're documenting what you're doing, they may go, hey, we're going to give you another few years because we really like what you're doing. You're helping us grow.
Yeah, I love it. I think that's really important. And I think I just, I just want to leave this there for a moment of just reflection. Are we doing enough in the industry to connect not only our clear technical skills with commercial skills? Because there's no point having one or the other. There is a real connection of the both things that we need to be promoting and pushing and developing, right? I absolutely think that's
you always think we're doing enough, but we can always do more, and we have to keep evolving, whether it's more training, different avenues. There's always different ways to grow. So we don't want to become complacent and say, gee, we've hit our pinnacle in trainings and getting these people up. We need to keep growing and build that relationship between sales and technical. And that's why I came to Dillmore about 1.5 years ago. That was the vision that Wade Stevens, our president, had. And I went, whoa, you're talking my language. We want our sales staff to be technical and grow and understand that, they're more than just a salesperson. They're a solution provider.
Yeah. And I love the mantra. I think the only challenge we've got now is we've got to find how we also connect technology with that approach, because as we know, buyers are far more researched than they ever used to be when they, this ability to self-serve is so much greater than it's ever been. So the skill of the seller changes somewhat, but I think it's when it changes. So I think that's really valuable. So I love the mantra, and I think power to the Dillmore Oil's mission and vision. Doug, let's just segue a little bit, because you mentioned in your introduction and in other aspects around the importance of community. I want to put it in that sort of more broader sense. STLE, mentoring people, networking, conferences. That kind of whole thing. And you mentioned you were just only recently at an event with Ilma as an example. You were is the better? Is it called Better World?
I got a sticker somewhere here.
Yeah.
Moving the world forward better, I think, was what it was.
There we go. Around that space, isn't it? We could be corrected as Ilma listen back to this, but the intention is that we've got it right. Tell me, Doug, why is community so important to you?
It's so important, and we actually did this at the board meeting. Is what has STLE done for you? What's the best thing? And I said, I've studied a lot and I've done a lot, but I'll never tell you I know everything. I know who to call, and through that community of STLE, I can reach out to some of the industry icons. Dr. Gareth Fish with Lubrizol, who's won every grease award in the world. David Turner from Citco, all these different companies, whether additives or research and development. And I go, I've got a question, and that's where not being afraid to ask the question. I joked about Heinz Block, one of our industry icons in compressors, and I was doing a compressor crossover a food plant, and I was doing a risk analysis and said, what's the contamination level coming through? And I go, he's the icon. And through technology, I tracked him down. I'm not a stalker, but called him in he was living in Denver, Colorado. And I said, Mr. Block, you don't know me, but I'm a fan. I have some compressor questions. And I mean, hour and a half later, we're talking and compressors and all the different things. And that's where your community comes in. Be part of these organizations to learn and grow. And I used to joke when I first joined STLE as a member years ago, I got the TLT magazine and I could read about 2 articles in it and understand. But over the years, I start growing and understand. Now I'm reading the research and development of, nanoparticles and new metal formulations and different things like that. And so I can understand that more now because I've grown and learned through that community. And ILMA through the Manufacturers Association, all the manufacturers belong to it. So you can reach out on formulation questions and different things like that. So community is huge. That's how you learn and grow.
And I have to say, I mean, I echo what you say. I mean, I can only echo what you say there around community. And I've seen how you've nurtured even our relationship into being more community based. So I see you living it, and examples of that. We're talking together at time of recording about what does STLE and Plan Grow Do look like, where you've introduced your company to our latest book, Selling Lubricants Smarter, which I have to say I can see over your shoulder. So I see it live out in your day to day. So I think, community absolutely vital, and will continue to be so.
Yeah, and not giving you a plug, but I read a book years ago recommended by Ray Tebow. Ray was the guru of teaching the CLS exam and the trainings, and I sat through Ray's class and became good friends. I won the Ray Tebow Excellence in Education Award through the STLE, which was such a huge honor because he was another great mentor that I didn't mention. Best 3 days sitting in his class, and he recommended the Challenger Cell book. And, I read that and thought, wow, solution provider, all the different things. And when your book came out, and of course, I've got to get it. I read all the lubrication and anything to make yourself better. And I thought, wow, this takes that to a whole new level of being technical, being in communities and social media and different things like that to help you grow.
Yeah. Well, I'm blushing now. So thank you. So look, community is important, and your advocacy to our listeners is, work it, nurture it, never take it for granted, and just keep developing it. But there's an aspect to community where you're the mentor, right? Where you are that I wouldn't say focal point, but you're a very defined role in that sort of relationship. What have you learned from being a mentor to others, Doug?
It's rewarding. I was mentored, like I've said earlier, by Greg and Mike, and that's been one of my big things is because I was given that opportunity to be mentored. I want to be a mentor. And that's what I'm challenged. We have, at Dilmar, we've got a program where we're training up our salespeople, as I said, for certification levels. And we've got some really great young staff that they're allowing me to mentor, to bring up. Because I always joke, I'm getting a little older. I got some gray. I'm not going to work forever. I'm going to go fishing. But when I leave, we want to have a staff. And that's what I challenge them to do is, you have to carry on that mentoring legacy. A lot of times we get people that knowledge is power, right? They're going to hold it close to the chest because they feel that's their power. I don't think we should do that. I think we should give knowledge freely and teach freely because that's a gift. And I always tell them, I said, by the time I'm done, I want you to be as smart or smarter than me. Because I think some of them are starting out a little younger. They'll have a lot more time to learn. And it's really rewarding to see their passion start to grow for the industry. They start going in and doing their first plant survey together, an asset survey. And they're calling me up less and less because I joke, I go, we had this big customer I was copied in on the emails, and I told Johnny, one of our sales guys who's doing really great, I said, hey, did you notice something? He goes, what's that? I go, they don't copy me in anymore. They go to you and they know you're going to find the answer for them. And I said, so that you're doing a great job. You're growing, you're becoming that resource. And, he didn't realize that. So he's real excited about that now.
Yeah, love it. So the mentoring piece is a very satisfying aspect of your professional life now, I'm hearing, right?
It is. And that's, you always want to leave a legacy. And that's what I love, because Dilmar's allowing me to do that and leave a legacy with the next generation. We're a family-owned business, and we're actually have the 4th generation in the company running it, 94 years, I think. And so I told Earl, the 4th generation, I said, I want the 5th and 6th generation to have people like me on staff. And he goes, oh, I like that idea. I said, well, good. And they support me in every way, and I'm greatly appreciative of that, because that's a key thing. It's having a company support what you want to do and help you grow. And you all have that same mission, on what you're doing.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you, that legacy piece, what does that look like? And I think you've just articulated it for me, that the next generation at Dilmar will look and sound just like Doug. Maybe that's a little bit of a downside of AI, that we could probably make that happen right now, right?
I don't know. I got some crazy stuff in the noggin AI doesn't have yet.
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm with you on that. Listen, Doug, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. And just before we do leave, I got a hunch where this is going. But is there one piece of advice that you would give to our listeners of Beyond the Blend that you would want to leave them with?
Never stop learning and never stop mentoring. Once you learn something, pass it on is the key thing.
Yeah, I love it. It's simple, but it's powerful.
Yeah.
Doug, if people wanted to follow more of your story, where would they be able to read, find you, connect with you? Where would you send them?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. We have a lot of fun on LinkedIn. It's not just, a business thing. We joke with a hashtag, I know David Turner, if you get a first class seat in an airplane. And I love tribology. I'm big on usually handing out an I love tribology t-shirt to people that, answer a question correctly. But usually LinkedIn's the easiest way, or Doug@Dilmar.com.
Fantastic. So what really stands out for me from this story is that expertise isn't just about technical knowledge. It's about curiosity. It's about continual learning. And it's about helping others, raising standards everywhere with everyone around you. Thank you for sharing your insights and your passion with us today. Thanks to everybody that's listened in to Beyond the Blend. And we'll catch you at a future episode coming soon. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, everybody.
Lubricant Expo Europe is back at Messe Düsseldorf for its 5th year, taking place September 15 to 17, 2026. Lubricant Expo Europe is a must-attend annual event for professionals looking to discover or promote latest advances in lubricant and lubrication technology. Whether you're an engineer, executive, or industry professional, this free-to-attend exhibition and conference connects lubricant solution providers with end-user buyers and the entire chemical and equipment supply chain. We have over 320 exhibitors, including Kluber, Petro-Canada, Afton, Infineon, Lubrizol, Castrol, Total Energies, Brooker, and many more. Join us and see for yourself.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beyond the Blend. Be sure to follow us to catch next and future episodes as we continue to explore the people within the lubricant market.